open our work session for today. Please silence and shut off your cell phones and join us in the pledge. Commissioner Albright, yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So, we have a timed item for 9:15 for discussion on solar farms and irrigated land and setbacks. We also have some other things that we can do that are not on the timed item. First of all, I want to welcome our new commissioner, Barry Schulenberger. He is just been sworn in yesterday, and we're really excited to have him going forward. Really excited about the work ahead of us. So, also, the first thing that I think we should probably do is appoint a chair and vice chair. Is there any discussion on that?
Nominate James as chair.
Second?
I second.
All right. Okay. It sounds like the motion's going to pass, no matter what I say. So, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate that. Second item would be to appoint a vice chair for the committee in case I am not present.
I nominate Mark Albertson.
I will second that.
Touche.
All right. No need to call for any nays because we haven't voted yet. So, Commissioner Albertson, do you have a vote on that?
Whatever you guys want to do.
Okay. Well, let it see Commissioner Albertson as the vice chair.
And those are all unanimous.
Any nays?
No, nice.
All right, thank you. So, next item would be solar advisory committee applications. We have a number of them before us. A few that came in late last night, and one this morning, I do believe. So, if we could, I don't think these guys are gonna do anything. Maybe we could hold off on those applications though, if the board's all right with that, until after we've had some more discussion on the actual advisory committee itself at 9:15. Are you guys comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'd like to make sure, since I'm new, I'd like to understand the what the committee is being tasked to do, right, versus talking about the who.
Right, and we can even hold off on appointing or approving these applications till tomorrow. We could act on it today, but sometimes it's more prudent just to wait a day and do it in the regular session the following day. Next item, Daniel Tagg on the Fema contract for federal disaster relief funds. Is Daniel coming today?
No.
Okay.
Anne's going to do that.
Oh, Annis. We can hold off on that if it might take too long. We do have time right now.
She's available.
Okay, perfect.
She just thought our solar discussion would take a little longer, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's on for a timed item at 9:15. I just figured.
Do you think we can get through the FEMA attendance?
I think so. It's not too terribly complicated. And if not, we can always come back and discuss it further. Good morning, Dan.
So Daniel's busy today, but he has been involved with Oregon Emergency Management and a FEMA request that has been flowing through the state due to the significant wildfire events this last fall. So Lake County can enter into a contract that you have in front of you to sign that will reimburse us for our cost, responding mostly to the Bratton Fire in Paisley. So, small projects are available for reimbursement up to $131,000. Large projects are something above that. I think we're gonna be in the small project category. We're still trying to get all the information from partner agencies and things like that to get reimbursed on. One of the things we're questioning about right now is giving reimbursement and helping support the rural fire agencies that helped respond on that fire as well. So there's discussions there. So this just starts the process, and then we'll start gathering our costs and sending them in for reimbursement. Jim Bailey reviewed the contract. He says, go ahead.
Okay. Does the board have any questions on this?
FEMA dollars, do not have to be repaid, correct?
Right.
And what is the qualifications to receive them?
Entering into this contract, and then it has to be eligible expenses according to responding to the
You have to prove that you
Yeah.
used supplies or goods or,
And we can get reimbursed for like our time that we spent there. We did have staff that was there. So you know, we have to watch the documentation on this. If we've used other federal dollars already to reimburse ourselves, then we can't double dip. And so we have to watch exactly what pays for what on this fire.
So we can use this to help with private citizens who've lost fencing, lost grazing, or not.
I feel like that's a separate process. I will double check that though. I thought that would be available to those citizens. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, the USDA has already reached out to them and they have an inventory of people who have lost things like fencing and hay and things in there. They're working on that side of the FEMA stuff with them, the landowners.
this is more of emergency response.
Because we know we had a lot of expenses with the rural fire departments plus the wildland. On that fire was instrumental. So. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Daniel's taking the lead on this. He sends me paperwork, that he might need information from me. He's been more in tune with OEM, and I'm not sure if it's exactly this solicity or not, but he's in tune with OEM's part of this FEMA project as far as statewide, and so he'll be the point person moving forward. I'm just like the document gatherer and then the dollars, accounting for it and making sure, like I said, the pots stay clean.
Yeah, I don't know Solicity Ice Fire.
OEM's gone through significant
Yeah,
changes.
and that, I was just about to say, Daniel himself has been frustrated with the fact that, you develop a relationship with someone at OEM and they change rapidly, especially in 2020. We burned through a lot of people. The word of caution, I suppose, I would just have is, as new people are kind of coming into some of these roles, we just watch it a little extra carefully, because sometimes we get confident with the folks that have been in this role, that have been doing it for a long time. They're seeing some of the new folks miss, and so, but I mean, this looks fine to me. And like you say, Daniel Tagg's been on point of this. He's been doing a pretty good job. And, he stays in touch with me pretty regularly. So, I just, as new people kind of cycle into these roles, they make mistakes, and sometimes it's up to us to catch them. So, that's all I got. No real questions.
Okay.
No, thank you. Appreciate it, Ann. And and we'll act on this tomorrow, I believe. Hang on 1 second, I may have a question. Where's the signature sheet? That was something that I didn't quite fully see
Page
here.
11, I believe.
The pages aren't numbered.
Or 10.
Oh, weird.
10 or
10?
11.
Okay. And whose signature, you need one of the commissioner's signatures, basically, just need the chair's signature.
Yes, please.
Sounds good,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so next item, we've got, 8th Amendment to OHA agreement. I don't really have a lot of time to discuss some of these things. Melanie, are you doing the presentation on these?
I can, if you guys would like.
I don't see Judy here, so I just.
No, so, let's see. So the 8th Amendment is carrying over some funds from last year to the new year. And they're making some assumptions on the presented budget. So they're, the 8th Amendment is for mental health though.
The 8th Amendment, is that the mental health?
So they're going to now charge $1,200 per individual for treatment services. And they're going to charge that to Medicaid and OHP. They anticipate that other insurance, private providers will pay $1,200 per treatment. They're just increasing their reimbursable rate, and then they're predicting that budget off of these predictions. There aren't any carryover budgets for this Medicaid or mental health contract that I saw. With the other amendment, there are some carryover dollars, and they are rolling that over to 2021, and there is a little bit more coronavirus funding for vaccinations.
Through the mental health?
No, for the other amendment,
That's the 17th.
the 17th Amendment. Just some minor tweaks and some rollovers, and some assumptions built in. But we will find out the adopted budget in February, I believe.
Does the board have any questions on this?
I do not.
Just real briefly, I'll just, the mental health one I'm perfectly fine with. The public health one, well, honestly, both of them are OHA agreements. When they increase funding, we typically see very small amounts up to the increased funding, and it goes back and forth between the decreases and the increases, but typically they always come with additional tasks and additional work for our public health folks and our mental health folks. So if the state is going to be increasing the funding, say a couple $1,000s or whatever, they put extra money in, but the tasks themselves require several $1,000s worth of work, you kind of just, it's a moot point, and it kind of kills the whole point of the increase. And in some cases, what I've seen is it's actually not enough to cover the reporting requirements even. So we look at it and we say, oh, this is an increase, but the added tasks that the state put on our public health with that contract are sometimes not worth the hassle and the trouble. It's just one of my frustrations. With there being nothing else on those two items for the 8th and 17th Amendment, we can move into our timed item at 9:15, discussion on solar farms and irrigated land and setbacks. So Would anyone like to start? I see
Okay,
one.
can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
So, I had, Melanie bring up the setbacks and the irrigated farm ground for our discussion, because there's many of our committee members here, to give us a direction on where I personally wanna go. We have less than 2% of our irrigated farm ground is the 2%, less than 2% is irrigated farm ground in our whole county. I didn't get the exact number for just the Goose Lake valleys, which would be way less than that. Also, there's no law, there's a 50-foot setback, if I'm correct, Darwin, on property boundaries for developing solar. There's nothing specifically on residential homes where the setback is. So in reality, the way things are right now, they can build within 50 feet of somebody's house if their house is on the property line. So what I personally want to start looking for is giving a 200-yard setback from a home. In other words, 600 feet minimum. And for one, there's nothing that says in there that people lose property values with the solar, but we all know that more than likely you do. And so to keep this somewhat under control, I would like the advisory committee to work on irrigated farm ground. What's your guys' thoughts on that? And plus the 200 yard or the 600 feet setback for building next to residential homes. That's kind of the direction. I talked to Representative Rushkey yesterday. I'm assuming you did too. He said he was gonna
We
contact
texted you a little bit, we were gonna talk today.
Reschke is in support of those ideas also. I'm just gonna be flat out honest. I do not want solar on irrigated farm ground. And I do not want it right up against people's homes. And so, but I will take the advice, we would all take the advice of our advisory committee, that's what you guys are there for. And, but those are my immediate thoughts on that. And so,
How'd you come up with the distance? Is that just is there any science behind it?
there's no science behind it, I'm just doing it. You know, we have to have some kind of distance, and 50 feet wasn't sufficient for me. And so, my problem that I have in this whole solar thing is, I'm very much a property rights advocate. And so, I don't want to limit it so much that somebody with 200 acres of hard pan can't build a solar facility as long as it meets these needs. But to build large facilities on irrigated farm ground is ridiculous, and we never get that back. So no, the 200 yard, the 600 feet is just, we can adjust that to how you guys feel fit. But I do want something in there where it's not right next to the homes. And so we because nobody wants to look out their window and see their view go from Crane Mountain to a solar facility. And so,
Well, I can sympathize, I live a long way from, solar panels, but I can see them from the airport from my house in the evenings, especially when they're tipped, to the west. And so that's well beyond 600 feet. I guess the thing we gotta keep in mind is it realistic? And, think beyond solar panels, if there's a business in the future that maybe we're not even thinking about, is 600 feet a hindrance versus, I just don't know. I'll be honest, I'm not in support of seeing the solar panels on irrigated land either, so you know what I stand. Now, the distance thing,
so what do you guys feel, or anybody, about the setback? Say it's your own property, but we can make it so it's a 200 setback from neighbors, or does it have to be from your own house? If you're creating the solar project, I mean, what do you guys think?
For starters, I can see what Barry's saying about, the distance. I mean, look, and how it might impact other projects later on. Look at Red Rock and part of their stuff that's all lit up at night. You can see it from Stock Drive and West Side Road at night. I mean, that's much farther than 600 feet. If there wasn't a slight curve, you could see it from my house. But, you can't stop economic development, but at the same point in time, and you do need to preserve property rights, but at the same point in time, you also have to preserve the land and the agricultural rights and the cultural history. And as you said, Mark, if you put this into solar development in 15, 20, 30 years, whatever time they decide, okay, we're done with this project, that land can never go back. We have permanently lost that small percentage of the 2% of irrigated ag land forever. It can never be recovered. So, there is that to consider. On a personal standpoint, as many of you guys know, this project is going to be right across the street from me and right across the street from my front window. So every day it's going to be shining right into my house. Do I think 600 feet is far enough? No, not really, because 600 feet, I mean, it is a significant distance, but that's still going to have a very significant impact on what that does to my house, to my property, to my, the way I live my life.
We may also just acknowledge and consider that there are other impacts besides view sheds.
Right.
When you have these projects, I mean, I get where this conversation is kind of going. Is 200 enough? I can still see it. Well, it's hard to make the argument that any distance is enough when you live in a basin. You can see all the way across it. Out in Summer Lake, you can almost see the curvature of the earth out looking out across my place.
Right.
So the idea of it being within my view shed, it's kind of an unfair argument for any kind of development. So I can see where Commissioner Albertson's going with having at least a 200-foot setback for some of these.
600.
Well, 200 yards. Sorry, apologies. 200 yards setback because of just the immediate solar panels being erected right next to a home, because there's nothing that restricts or mandates that there is a setback next to a home. There is in some cases, as Darwin was kind of pointing out, or Commissioner Allison and Darwin were saying. Putting in a setback for that reason, I could see there'd be some utility in that, and at least having a standard to go by. But I guess I get hung up on the view shed argument. I'm gonna be kind of middle of the road here because for me, I can see 5 miles out. I mean, I can easily. So it's almost an argument that's not really worth going down sometimes. I think going back to preserving the irrigated farmland that we have and preserving that valued farmland, that's a much better place to go. Not that I have any issue with the setback itself, but if we're just looking to extend that to where it's no longer in our view shed, it's going to be really difficult.
If we do something like that, then we'll never be able to build anything.
Correct. That's my point.
So-
Yeah.
You know, and I want to make aware that the county right now is right under $1 million revenue from solar. So I'm not saying that I don't want solar, but I do want to protect the property rights of others, plus our cultural and heritage farming communities. And so that's the reason we set this committee up, is so we can start knocking a few of these things out, because it was just do whatever you want to.
Is there any way to, I guess this has been the planning side of it, but have some kind of an ordinance that allows you to look at individual circumstances when something arises? You know, like whether it's
Conditional
solar,
use.
I mean, we're talking about solar, but solar maybe 600 feet is appropriate, maybe something else is, I don't know, but then there might be another industry that wants to move in. You know, maybe it wouldn't be that offensive to have them 200 feet away instead of 600 feet away or something. I don't know whether there's some way that, I mean, that's a pretty iffy ordinance, but something like that.
Yeah, I think that what, Mark, I'm hearing you say for the solar committee's task is to look at just for solar a 600-foot setback or whatever could be maybe backed by some science or backed by some a little bit of understanding of why this will help protect people's land values that are adjacent. The language in the ordinance itself just says that the side yard setback for a non-farm use adjacent to a farm use shall be a minimum of 50 feet. So that's the setback for a non-farm use adjacent to a farm use. Now, most of these homes that we may be talking about may not be considered in farm use, but the Planning Commission has liberty to go beyond that. This says a minimum of. So currently, if an application was applied for, the recommendation from the Planning Commission and the approval that they give, negotiated hopefully with the adjacent owners and the applicant during a hearing process, would establish what is deemed the appropriate setback. To date, we've done even less than 50 at times because there was not adjacent farm uses for some of the solar projects that we've done. So. But the 50 foot is the minimum standard there.
So there is some flexibility.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So the problem we got with this project is that it's being reviewed by the state, and we don't have any, we don't have this proposal or this idea put into our code yet. So what we would need to do is do a code amendment to adjust this setback if we felt it was this board felt it was most appropriate to put something more solid in the code. But again, any conditional use permit could be worked out in the approval what the appropriate setback should be. But there's a whole lot of other criteria too, so.
So the setback though is, it's concerning farm use, correct? It's not concerning,
It's not,
not concerning an industrial, is which solar is considered an industrial facility.
well, it's considered a non-farm use,
Yeah.
so, the 50 foot is what the standard is.
And that's,
and
and that's,
commercial or industrial uses can be approved conditionally in these zones.
and that's the same setbacks.
Yeah, it's the same setback.
And is the setbacks for residential, or is it just because
There's
it's?
no setback from residential specifically mentioned in this zone.
And
There are
and
another
that's the
zones.
reason I wanna have this, because there is no, on rural residential or residential period, there's no setbacks from solar at all. And so that means right now, possibly they could build right within 50 feet of your home, no matter where it's at. And so, right,
Yeah, and so I think, Justin, maybe Amanda's question was, or some of her comments was, how you'll see it definitely across, to the west out of your home. One of the things that you've, I think, researched pretty well, and Shannon, you as well, is our scenic highway and the setbacks there. If you want to speak to that, I haven't yet done all the research on that, but.
I would have to go back and look at my notes, but there are minimums. I believe that the shortest minimum for some of those setback areas was 1,000 feet. So, on certain things, it's even farther. They actually have, it has to be within 1 mile or less, or more than 1 mile and this and that. But I'd have to look for the specifics on what each of those criteria are, because within the scenic byway, there's stuff for, forested land, wetland, all that. And they each have their own criteria. But I believe, if I remember correctly, and again, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, that the most minimum setback was 1,000 feet. And for like the current Blue Marmot project, that's only 2 of those proposed sites.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't help Mr. Roseberry's property, it wouldn't help, anything out on West Side with that. And so that's where just having, like you said, Mr. Albertson, a standard, and have it kind of how it's worded now, where it's a minimum of at least 200 yards, because maybe generally speaking, 200 yards is enough, but in this one particular situation, it's not. And that gives you that kind of leeway to say, well, we need to consider this one, thing, but it can't be less than 200 yards. But you do need to have a standard.
Yeah, I just need clarity on, so what Blue Marmot's looking for is they're using an exception to get over goal 3 of Oregon and of ag ground. And if you read the ordinance, it has to be of significant or serious impact on that facility. They don't look at a view shed because that's outside of the standards of the siting committee. They look at each piece as an individual block. So I guess I'm a little bit confused here. I understand the direction you're asking us to look at, but are we going to just acquiesce the irrigated ground at this point? So are we looking just to mitigate it, or are we looking at saying, look, we very much want solar here, but we don't want it on ag ground? That's kind of where I'm coming from, because if we're going to just acquiesce the pieces and say, well, now we're just looking for setbacks, then we're already in a position that we're not going to look at the exceptions, because the reality is they're exploiting the exception, and it's easy to look up, it's really simple, and that's where they're driving this from. And in those exceptions, they have 4 or 5 criteria that they need to meet. And if you read it, you see the mitigation factors and all of this. So what I guess I'm asking the commissioners is, do you want us to not look at any of those exceptions and we're not gonna take that on, and we're just looking to, to back it off, or how do you want us to approach that, or do we even approach that? Are we trying to protect the irrigated base, or aren't we, and we're just trying to mitigate the damage? That's the question I'm at.
I'm more for the first line, and that's what my comment was originally.
So-
was not wanting to
So
just
then the
look at
questions I
setbacks.
have for you guys is that, do we start looking at and start pulling the numbers up so that we can create, look, this has a significant impact on the 2.6% of irrigated ground in Lake County. And of that 2.62%, what is the percentile in the Goose Lake area? Because we need to distill it down to that point. The second thing is the mitigation factors. For example, if they transfer the water to light-type ground, does that have the production value of the ground that's being taken out? 2, does it interfere with future generations of agriculture to expand and to grow? That's part of the criteria. So do you want us to look at those things, or do you want us to just say, look, we're going to lose this through the state process, so we might as well see if we can just back it off the road? That would be my question to you guys.
I don't know if there's any guarantees one way or the other with the state process. I think from my point of view, I just want to make sure that we're being thoughtful and going through, looking at all the pros and cons of future development beyond just what we have in front of us today. Taking out any specific solar company from the argument. Solar has become a big thing. I think it's going to continue. I don't think it's for lack of a better term, going away. I don't have any objection to solar development per se, aside from when it begins to impact the limited amount of irrigated farmland that we have here in Lake County. So I think we're looking for data, we're looking for real statistics, we're looking for answers to the questions that we all, I think, in this room even, and the folks that are even on the call maybe, which I see Eric has joined us from Blue Marmot and Lori Hutchison. I appreciate you guys joining us today. I just want to make sure that we're having a fully rounded conversation about the future of our county, because we three up here, that's our only role, is to look after the interests of Lake County. So that's why we want to we want better information to make not necessarily better arguments, but a better case for, and that when we make these decisions going forward, not necessarily what the state's doing right now through FSEC or whatever. Obviously, it puts us in a better place if we have these things already established. But we think that there was more to the conversation to be had early on, and I don't think the conversation really took place at the level that I think a lot of the folks are looking for today. So that's what we're looking for. We just, at least from my perspective, I don't know.
Well, to comment on Garrett's, I think we don't limit ourselves. The committee doesn't limit itself to irrigated farm ground. We want you guys to say this, the consensus of the advisory committee is, number one, we're protecting irrigated farm ground. Number two, we won't setback. I don't know what your number two is gonna be, but create a list of what's most important as a consensus of the committee of what we need to fix, what we need to improve on. You guys tell us what you want. And you're an advisory committee, so you advise us on the most important things that your committee comes up with. And if the setbacks isn't in your highest regard, I have no problem with that. But I do want you guys to talk about it. I want you to talk about, whatever comes up, and is the protecting irrigated farm ground the top of my list? Yes. And then mine second would be the setbacks, and the reason is because there's no protection for residential homes at all. And I wouldn't want a solar facility in my front yard nor my backyard. And if we can come up with some distance, I just threw that distance out there. You guys come up with what you think. But I also want you to think of private property rights too. And don't limit us so much that we can't do anything. And, I'm thinking of a guy up in North Lake who worked his place his whole life, and the solar project is his retirement. And I don't want to take that from him, I wouldn't want to take it from anybody. But on the other hand, if it's a detriment to the rest of our community, we have to look at those things. And so that's where I'm at. And so I want you guys to have the freedom to go whatever direction you feel the need is to go. And
So maybe just to piggyback on that, as I was kind of taking notes here, and we start to formulate some sideboards for the committee so that they kind of know more of what we're looking for. We put in a clause of not limited to. Basically, this is what we're looking for you guys to discuss, but we're not wanting to limit that conversation, so to speak, to these things. If there's something that you guys identify that we haven't seen as a concern per se, that's glaring at us in the face, we want you guys to come forward with a recommendation that we at least look at these and ask whether or not you guys should have some more freedom to look in a little bit deeper at this particular subject line. So say we give you a list of things to discuss and things to look at, data to collect, or for recommendations to bring back to us. And we leave something out. We leave out, say, soil compositions. We don't have anyone on the committee to look at that, and it's brought up as a concern. We would want to know about that, and but we don't want to limit you that you can't talk about those things either. So maybe would that help maybe a little bit? I mean, I want to give them something as we kind of formulate the bylaws of the committee. We haven't given you guys any yet, so it's been really this has been a developing process. We really saw the need, so we wanted to form the committee, but there's more work to be done. And aside from just you guys having the meeting and sitting down and having coffee, there's definitely, we have to have some definite direction for you guys and where you're going to go. So when you come to us with a recommendation, there's a purpose behind it. So, yes, sir.
So, just to also piggyback off that and your comments, Garrett, one of the things that I've been thinking about that I feel would, carry a lot of weight. So I've been hearing, don't want to limit the potential of solar development in some ways. And private property rights, of course, that ties into that. So maybe the committee being in charge of coming up with some recommendations for other sites, proposals for other areas where development could potentially be built, of course, off irrigated ag land, right? So maybe coming up with some recommendations that guide that, process. I don't know, that's kind of specific, but.
Okay, maybe I could ask a question on that. It's a good place to go, actually. So, for instance, if you have a pivot and you want to put in solar to help run your pivot, the entire square is farmland. Only the circle is irrigated within that, so the corners are not being utilized. If we create rules restricting any development of solar on irrigated farmland or on farmland, so to speak, on ag land, that farmer cannot develop solar on those corners of that pivot. And if it's a pivot way out there where it's not affecting
That's
any
not
distribution, it's not irrigated, correct. So that's the difference. It's a key point just to kind of throw out there. We're not looking to stop development on ag land or solar. Is that kind of where you're going with that? I'm asking a question.
Right, and I think that's a fantastic question. I think the questions, Garrett, you were asking before too, are fantastic questions. Those specific, uses, how do those tie into the larger picture? And then I think also kind of, and I hadn't thought of that, so I'm glad you brought that up. I think where I was going with it kind of is thinking on the lines of there may be other parts of the county and country where we have less of an impact on viewshed. We have less of an impact on irrigated farmland in at all. There may be, sagebrush country where it's rugged, it's tough, it's hard to develop, but these companies have a lot of money and a lot of resources to throw at that production of energy. So maybe we're looking into developing criteria or proposals, specific site proposals for other, say we're not going to allow development on irrigated ag land for blue marmot perhaps if that's a concern. Then are there alternatives that we can propose since it's kind of an uphill battle, I think.
Well, I'm in total agreement with him when you look at the standards and you look at goal 3. And originally where Lake County started is that we were very much renewable driven. And the underlying current of that was, yes, we want this done, but we want it done on non-productive ag ground. So as this has transpired, we've had different entities come in here and they've been relatively sensitive to that, or at least that's what I've seen. But the reality is that this entity, for lack of better terms, is going to use an exception not to be sensitive. And it's all about location. If those pieces of ground happen to be sagebrush, they'd still be there. But it's all about interconnection and cost of facility. And so the reality is that it's cheaper to push through with the exception than it is to push the project 2 miles away on non-productive ground. So it's a cost analysis for them. So I am pro-resource and pro-renewable, so long as the entity that is doing it is, for lack of better terms, behaving correctly for what Lake County's direction was going. You have an entity that's going to exploit an exception. And the unfortunate part is that even if there is a line limitation after this project, which maybe in the future it does expand, is that once you take the ag component out of it, you've opened the door. Everything is wide open with that exception. And it goes back to a private property rights issue, where you got to be careful where you go. But the reality is that when an individual buys EFU Class 1 soil under an irrigation district, they realize that there are limitations on that ground. EFU is a protector of that ground. Goal 3 of Oregon is a protector. LUBA protects that ground. So
And they knew it when they bought it.
what do that's where I'm getting confused is where do we go with this? Do we say, look, we've got alternative sites for you, even though the cost of the infrastructure is incrementally much larger? It's apparent that they're not really, that's not part of their equation. Otherwise, they would have done it like the prior solar facilities have done it. And that's just the reality of it. It's a cost analysis.
So I just want to just inform the board that, you know, what you're talking about, the goal exception, there's two different standards, right? So, and this was explained in the first meeting that, for EPR and also for the obsidian projects and other projects, that we've looked at. But the goal exception, goal 3 exception standard under a county, reviewed application requires looking at alternative lands. There's an analysis that has to take place that shows, the applicant proves that they've looked at alternative lands. The goal 3 exception process under the state standard through review through FSEC doesn't have that standard. However, our comments, when we submitted comments, this board through with me, my help, said that we want that standard, the local standard, to apply to Blue Marble. So Blue Marble will see that. FSEC will decide if they want to use our comment and make them use an alternative lands analysis. Because it's an FSEC project, that's all we can do as a special advisory group. And so some of the comments that we're talking about as well is, this board will easily submit a comment that we don't want it on irrigated land, and we also don't want it within a certain distance of existing homes. They'll consider those things. There may be some negotiating, but what we ultimately need to get to and realize is that to change our ordinance won't really affect what's already been applied for. And so we can't change the goalpost in the middle of the game. However, looking in the future, we're going to use you guys as advice, and have some kind of balance with some of the industry to explain kind of what they have been doing for the years before they even make an application, because there's a lot of research that they do. It's not like they're just going to pick a land. And so, showing what's available and who's a willing seller, something that they certainly have some information on that I'm sure they'd like to share with us to help us better understand what goes into eventually getting to an application. I brought with me today for everybody that I knew was going to be in the room a couple of handouts. One is the new House Bill 2329 law, which many of you have probably researched already. But the chair for FSEC actually presented to the Oregon planning directors, I believe it was in early December, this presentation that came with these two handouts. And so it's a summary of the solar, photovoltaic acreage thresholds and associated standards. And so it's a fairly easy chart, and I'm going to hand it out, but then we can keep our discussion, you can kind of look at it as we go. But there's definitely limits already to agricultural land, and if you exceed those limits, it's a goal 3 exception. So, and I'll have this again during our committee meetings that will start, which again will be the third Tuesday of this month.
Thank you.
And to add to what everybody's been saying, I don't know if this would be able to stop the current Blue Marmot project because the application's already in the process. But for future stuff, this would help with the development of ag land. As far as providing alternative sites or alternative site criteria might be a better way of putting it. There is some science and some other aspects we can put behind it. You have certain stuff, you know, we know irrigated ag land is of a higher agricultural value. I'm not talking about economical value, I'm talking about an agricultural use value. Then you have marginal farm use. This is the stuff, you know, where the sagebrush is, where it's all rocky, where, you know, the backside of my property would be considered marginal farm use. Can I run some cows on there? Yeah, but can I put as many cows as if it was there towards the front of my property or across the street? No, it would be marginal. Now, does it have, you know, is that land important to me? Yes, but from an agricultural standpoint, is it as substantial as something, you know, there's soil analysis that goes into it, and we can say, okay, so these type of sites we do not consider appropriate for solar development. However, sites that are already legally classified as marginal farm use and have class 4 soils, you know, something with this sort of, you know, pH in the soil, these would be preferable sites to consider. And there is science behind that, because it's not as, for lack of a better way to put it, just it's not as useful for agriculture as irrigated ag land. There's more of it. It's just a better location, and there is science and history behind that to prove it.
Well, I agree with pretty much what everybody said, what Mark has said, but I am adamantly opposed to taking irrigated land out of production. And understanding what James said about putting solar panels in the dry corners of a pivot, somehow that, you know, and I'm not opposed to solar, but that's a very valid point that an individual property owner should be able to look at. But the problem with even transferring the water to other properties, you gotta understand whether or not it's the same quality of soil that'll produce the same income, the same resources. And once that land comes out of ag production, it's gone. I don't care whether there's a bond for reclamation or not, it'll never come back into production. And with our limited supply, then, you know, the other side of the issue is your property rights, which we all want to do whatever we can to enhance our own resources. I mean, you know, so it's not an easy resolution to this. You can't just say no, anything. But taking irrigated land out just makes absolutely no sense when you live in a county like we do with all the vast areas that, you know, not a cow on 150 acres for AUM, I mean, so, yeah.
One of the things I think that, you know, Blue Martlet's a different arena in its own, and so I want to give you guys an example of a project up in North Lake. Dinsdale had a pivot once that was in production, and then later he moved those water rights to another piece of ground that they had, and so he knew that ground wasn't productive, and obviously this is not a good example for this low end in the project we're talking about, but one of the things that we'll need to consider is how you know, maybe how long ago water rights were on there, or can you back a reason why this wasn't productive farmland? And water rights are bought and sold all the time, as you guys well know, and you know, obviously if this land were to come out for this project, then you you know, either Water Resources have to decide if they're gonna allow those to be transferred somewhere else or for another land, and so, but that Dinsdale piece was a real good example of a rancher who, and farmer who said, look, this land is not productive anymore. Solar, he's surrounded, I think, on all sides. He thought, hey, this would be a good spot to put some solar. And yet there was a house, I know, just on the southwest corner of that property. Like the
That was
ranch.
not, that was not his.
Yeah, that was not his. Yeah. It was a ranch hand for somebody in the area. So yeah, it's just, we're gonna need to consider, all this, and that's why this group will get started. We're gonna have our kickoff meeting on the 19th at 5 o'clock in this room. Certainly the phone will be available for people to dial in. But take this sheet that we're talking about and then know that the rules that we have in our ordinance already, obviously apply, but the state law applies directly. And so this rule, I've been here 10 years and it's changed multiple times. I mean, before the limit was 100 acres, you had to do a goal exception on any land, and it was 12 and 20 before that. And so for irrigated and high value. So, a year ago, this law was put into place, and a project locally can be up to 1,820 acres, I believe, and that's a lot of land, and certainly would be down in this area. But again, those thresholds, at 100 acres, or less, you're doing a goal exception, and I think our comment, we're going to push hard, hard as we can at the state that they recognize that we want an alternatives lands analysis on these, certainly those 3 sites. And we'll go from there. I mean, but I'm greatly appreciate this board giving us, some sideboards, but also knowing that we're not limited in the discussion. We just need to all, and I know I'm not saying it. A lot of you, most of you are very well educated already on solar and the limitations and thresholds that are out there. But we also need to understand the process on land use and how it works. Anyone can propose anything. Doesn't mean it's going to get approved. FSEC. Somebody asked the question, have you ever denied anything? No, they haven't denied anything. But I will tell you, anything that they approve can be contested, and we'll see. I mean, Obsidian's been 3 years on a project, and it's being contested now. And so, what will come of that? I don't know. But we'll have to continue to put forth our best effort and willing to come to the table. I appreciate that.
So, Darwin, you said that whatever we decide, this group and us decide, it won't affect the current project. And I get where you're going because our governor has moved the goalpost 100 times in the last year. And I understand that, but to protect our community and our heritage and our culture, we have to have these in here to protect not only future, but what's going on currently. And I don't think we're moving the goalposts. We're just learning to play the game. And their game so far has been, let's use goal 3 and go around us. I have a big problem with that. And so I wanted to apply not only to future, but to current. And of course, Jim Bailey's not on the phone right now, but I say it takes effect whenever it takes effect. And
We
whether
can
you
certainly
apply-
submit it, what
Yeah.
the legal counsel and what, FSEC and ODO, staff determine is will be up to them. I mean, certainly, I'm not saying we don't follow through on this process in a as quick manner as we can using, all the information to come up with the best decision. And this process, they're gonna consider any comments that we make, and so we can say, yes, we're in the process of adopting a new ordinance regarding solar, and these will be the standards that we're gonna adopt, and so therefore we want them to apply. Whether we're, halfway through or wherever at that process, our comments are still gonna come
Right, we still serve as an in an advisory role to some of the current projects, basically. So you guys would be serving as advisors to us as you kind of have that conversation, and
So,
there's nothing that should limit us to presenting comments or anything like that.
so who's privy to our working group?
So, that's a good question as far as, well, public would be allowed to attend?
Yeah,
No, yeah, I mean, they're not closed or private or anything. We have a number of applications in front of us from yesterday and this morning that we haven't approved yet. So that was one of the questions actually I had down on my paper that I was going to ask my board as to how well-rounded we wanted the committee itself to be. It would be nice to have some pro-solar, so to speak, voices on the committee to at least present you guys with some other alternative arguments, so to speak. And so it's also doesn't give the appearance that the committee is lopsided one way or the other.
So an outside entity could be privy to it all.
yeah, so we're gonna record the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna happen right before planning commission meeting
Mhm.
as a work session, so the planning commission will also be present. But it'll be a discussion, we'll come up with an agenda and lots of it, I've reached out to DLCD staff, our regional reps, John James and Scott Edelman. And as Commissioner Williams just stated, we're trying to see if we can get, some interest from, pro solar, I guess, just the industry to also come up with some of the data, so that we can also see.
Blue Marmot,
That's gonna be up to the board, I think they may have submitted an application this morning.
So, I'm gonna be square with you guys right now, alright? So, we have an application from somebody from Blue Marmot, and we have an application from somebody from
City.
Obsidian. So this is my honest opinion. Obsidian has worked with us in the past. They've tried to appease the commissioners and the public as much as possible. And Blue Marmot hasn't. And so we as a board can say Blue Marmot's not on there. If they don't want it, if they wanna have Blue Marmot on there, they can outvote me. But my recommendation will be we accept the application from Obsidian, but not Blue Marmot. And I'm just being straight up with you right now. Blue Marmot has not worked with us well, and I do not want them on my advisory committee. So that's my 2 cents.
Appreciate it. I was thinking, in forming this committee, it might be nice to have designated slots for who represents what. I believe there was some interest from the soil and water conservation. We haven't had an actual application from them yet.
Did they get sent one?
Yes, I
Yes.
see you.
Thank you.
Now,
I thought so, I just wanted.
Pete, you're on the water district, irrigation,
company.
yeah, out there in west side. And
But currently, I'm not representing,
you're not representing them, no.
I'm a private
But you have
landowner
experience.
because I have
Gotcha.
opinions that deal
Isn't held
with
by
me as an individual. There's one thing as a board member of the water company, and that is to preserve our asset of water. But I have other issues that, so I can't
Right,
really understand.
gotcha. No, totally
So I'm not really representing Lakeview Water Business.
So,
At this point, now, if they wanna tell me that I can, the board,
Mhm.
the rest of the board, that's another thing.
so, Chair, I would like to comment on your comment.
Absolutely.
So, I do not wanna do that.
you don't wanna do spots.
And the reason is that I don't wanna limit who's on we're gonna be well-rounded, and that'll be our job as a board to make sure it's well-rounded. But if, I'm gonna use Pete as an example, if he wants to speak for the water, district or.
We're not a district, we need
Water.
to clarify that,
Water,
because that brings up different
yeah,
ordinances.
so if he wants to speak for them, he can, and if he doesn't want to speak for them, he doesn't have to. You know, how many people at large are we gonna have, or, you know, and so I think it just muddies the water. And so
That's fine.
if somebody wants to apply to be on the advisory committee in whatever state they're in, have at it. And then we decide of whether they go on there or not. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because what I'm really just looking for is consensus as a board, so I appreciate you just bringing your thoughts up on that. I thought it might help us at least get some structure to it for us in approving the applications, but that's perfectly fine. We've got Elsie or I at the table, we've got a few of the other landowners, and I think it's, yeah, ultimately it'll be up to us to just review each application. So, Commissioner Schulenberger, do you have any thoughts?
Well,
You seem like you do, so.
yeah, we kind of keep traveling along on this subject. I get, getting back to the committee, we talked about, I heard Commissioner Albertson talk about, don't put us in a point where we can't do anything. And that is a concern. We don't want to have future economic development of Lake County be completely hamstrung. So I guess to the committee, that is something we need to keep in mind. And then I've heard, we'll set this up for solar. Well, is it for just solar, or is it for renewable energy? I mean, you gave the example of Red Rock, that's renewable energy. They don't, do they really need to be, a certain distance from all that too, then that probably would have nixed them out of where they're at. So, it's a tough road to hoe. And I just hope that we're considering our economic strategies in the future, whether it be solar or other renewable energies or something, ag-related, so that, we aren't so limited that we can't be productive.
So,
That is my number one concern.
so with that comment, real quickly, we've been talking about sideboards, and I don't think these guys have to decide what the sideboards are. I think you put sideboards on, you start limiting what they can do. If you bring us something and we don't like it, we just don't take it. And so, whatever you guys decide is your top priorities, give it to us. And then we'll decide where they fit. And, just you have the freedom to discuss amongst yourselves what's the most important things and bring them to us, and then we'll take care of it. You guys might have something that we haven't even seen yet that might be very high importance. And so we need to know those things. And that's the whole reason we have you guys as a committee, because you can come up with the data, you can come up with, any scenario that we might need. And so I don't want to limit you guys to anything. That's how I look at it.
So going back to process, and you bring up a very good point. This committee will give a recommendation through the planning commission to the board of commissioners who, prior to, the first evidentiary hearing, when you submit to the state a 35-day notice of intent to amend our zoning ordinance, we'll have a draft language put together. Now, the recommendation that comes from the committee, the planning commission will give that draft to the board commissioners, and then we'll start those hearing processes in which, however specific we get into the lands, then it requires, a Measure 57 notice to those landowners if we're going to potentially take away, some of their rights if we've limited it in such a way that it would be a taking, so to speak. So, our legal counsel will also need to give us, information about, how far we can go where it doesn't become a taking, where there can be exceptions, or, if this is a standard, how would you, still be able to maybe get to yes, by using some kind of exception in our own code. So,
Speaking of exceptions, like, say they're gonna build on Garrett's, next door to Garrett. If he says the exception could be, since he's within that certain distance, if he signs off on it, we're good.
exactly. Yeah, it's something like that.
That way, your neighbor has a voice on what's going to be built next door, and if he's good with it, he's good with it.
Right, yeah, we don't wanna be put in a position of denying something that everyone's perfectly fine with, it's simply based on a rule.
My problem is there's not a single person besides one person that owns the property on West Side that would support that solar facility. You give me another person, there isn't. And so, and I might be wrong, when those hearings come, they might come out of the woodwork. But I would bet on it that it won't happen. And so, and when Darwin's talking about the process, there's legal things that we have to do when we change things. And so, can you give us a brief rundown on how that?
Yeah, the notice of intent to, change your ordinance is gonna be sent to DLCD 35 days prior to the first evidentiary hearing. Now, we can hold at least 2 evidentiary hearings, we can hold multiple evidentiary hearings, but the original draft language will need to be sent with that notice. It's published in the paper, it's gonna be noticed to agencies, and then again, any affected landowner that this may affect. And so that, comes at an expense and a cost, which is fine. This board is willing to take on those costs. Once a recommendation from you guys to the planning commission, and that's kind of why we're trying to speed this up and have the planning commission involved firsthand, so they don't just get the summary, but they're fully engaged in the dialogue that happens. And then that recommendation would go to the board of commissioners, and then they would hold those hearings, and then there's a time to appeal it and all those things, and a effective date, usually 31 days after it's been adopted. But these will be open to the public, so anyone that's not appointed to the committee can still comment during the process. The chair of the planning commission will be at liberty to kind of limit comments if we need to, if it's going too long. But we'll again, I see this starting off with a whole lot of education on what's out there already, what the process is going to look like, and then where do we want to go from there. And there needs to be some kind of balance, because we don't want to make this so extreme that it doesn't become clear and objective standards, which can't therefore then be applied. And Lou would say, hey, that's not clear and objective, and you applying this condition of approval or saying it doesn't meet the criteria won't work. So.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this topic? I know we've been talking for over an hour now, so.
As far as the makeup of the committee, I feel that to get all of the input we would need, there probably ought to be somebody that is pro solar.
Yeah.
Um,
We're gonna have somebody pro solar on it.
But I think they need to be not just a landowner here, but a resident. of the county. I mean, this is a county ordinance we're looking at. We don't want somebody from Salem or Portland or having any major impact on the decision of the local voting landowner, tax-paying residents of the county.
So, speaking of that, so it's an advisory committee.
Right.
And so it would come to us, so
Still,
they don't really have a vote. I mean, if the advisory committee, 9 of you say we want this and the solar committee or the solar outfit wants this, where do you think we're gonna vote? And so that's where I'm at.
I'm not sure you're gonna get the, maybe enough information from somebody pro solar that's local. Yeah, that will give you good enough, well-rounded, information to get back to us.
like they may be pro solar, but will they have the experience and the information and just the education on the actual issues themselves? And just that might be something you could potentially run into.
I thought about it too, Pete, like, well, maybe you need to be a Lake County resident. But again, then we're limiting the good information maybe that can come back to us, right?
The knowledge.
Yeah, the knowledge.
I will say, Allison Parks Rudolph, who's Alan Parks' daughter, Poplar Ranch, she's on our planning commission, so the Poplar Ranch was one of the original, the only goal exception that's been actually approved in the county for solar back in 2011. So she's on our planning commission now, if that her perspective could be helpful.
Right.
Obsidian, I know, owns some of their projects in the land below them as well, so. But we can reach out as we move forward, we can reach out, we're not gonna be limited, and it'd be nice to have, just some voice, from some of these landowners of what their benefits been too, in their lease agreements and stuff. I know the county's certainly has been great for the airport, the lease, and also the project, so.
So, just speaking of the airport, we get what, 65,000? 70,000 a year for the airport from that?
Just on the lease.
Just
on the lease.
the actual tax, I think, is somewhere about what, the 300,000?
That's probably close to what I've got.
But what I'm saying is the 70,000 lease for the airport makes it so that doesn't come out of our general fund for the airport, and they're virtually self-sustaining now. And that just goes back, it's not all bad, we just gotta do it right. And so, $1 million to the county from solar, you don't hear us complaining about that. And so, but we need to do things right, and I
So
want
that it doesn't cripple our agriculture.
right.
Right.
Which is our number
When
one
it's
issue.
2.62% of our land, that's all that we have left. That has to be protected. And so,
The airport solar, just for everyone's knowledge, is $335,750 a year in tax, under the pilot that was agreed upon, paying a little taxes on that. And then the lease agreement that I had numbers was $64,000, so roughly $400,000 just on the airport, 320 acres, which was not in production. Which is probably better that it wasn't having livestock on, for strike hazard and things like that. So,
So, Mr. Chairman, we've been here a while. I recommend a 5-minute break.
Yes, sir. You took it right out of my head. All right, 5-minute recess. We'll come back in at 10:30. Thank you.
Are we gonna continue this discussion?
Likely, yes. We still have appointments for the committee as well. So we have to-
some, not a lot.
Yeah.
We'll get into
No.
it definitely on the
We'll get
19th
time.
at 5
We
o'clock.
we probably won't keep it going too much longer.
Life is fantastic in the third.
Hey, Darren. Good, how are you?
I just don't want to create.
So did, make the on application?
Yes.
Did he? I wasn't sure.
Yes. Yeah, I can't read it, but
Okay.
I'm telling him he needs to go back to school.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so just, correct the minute, but we also have one from Elaine Albright, which is Obsidian's, legal counsel.
Gotcha.
So, which would be nice to see the legal.
Yeah, what-
what she feels.
Right.
So hopefully those two are good, right? EPR count.
Yeah,
so one or two who, retires, actually instructed, actually one contract.
Okay, so.
I'll say it.
Sitting on the phone talking to the sheriff
Yeah,
about
I know,
the
especially
sheriff.
I can go back
I
to
don't know, I can't really.
minutes as well, and for comments from them already.
So I
Some of the landowners that, like, in the,
Obviously,
the hoppers dropping the four rocks, yeah, they mostly cut.
This is around
150, so.
Okay.
They said there's
Right, and I think that, that's something that, for us, sure, we are. Right, and so, but where we are, it's such a conversation about. Anything that'll work.
There's a lot to do.
Try
Well, this was started with some kind of
Okay.
Are you sure?
Must have quite a reputation.
And that one seemed to be a really good one. A couple of
Sure.
Historically never been that.
Oh, yeah, right.
Financial impact. And she was pulling out numbers.
I know.
Yeah.
It was the top 20 taxpayers in the
20,
county.
Okay.
And of those,
Everyone keeps saying it was
Of
gonna
the
be
top,
better, but
um,
I'm sitting there at New Year's and I
of the top 20,
it
there's
was 10 o'clock in the
11
morning,
of
Silver
them are
Lake,
solar
Chevy
projects.
got
So,
robbed.
Yeah.
Like,
That's huge.
It is, I'm just like,
You look at, take
really?
the Ruby pipeline out
Of
of
all
this, and it's,
And then I
there's
text
some
the guy,
very
and
high.
he ends up getting shot.
I mean, the top 10, I think it's like
When you
4.
have a fake
Or so.
Yeah, he brought a fake gun to a gunfight, that fight
Yeah,
is,
it's-
it's
it's-
fascinating.
Because he's real smart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't want to hurt anybody when I get killed.
That's where I don't.
Well, don't step out of the vehicle when the cops are
Which one of
after
these guys wouldn't
and
want to
wave
buy
a gun at
it?
them. That looks like an assault
Or
rifle.
not.
There's no
Most of
rules in the police
county-
force like there are in the military, where you only fire if fired upon.
That's
We don't
where-
have those rules for police officers,
I know
threat
three
designated
deputies.
charge.
I know 3 deputies who were shot.
Actually, I got back from, I'll send it to you as a, kind of a criteria sheet or their formula for what they can go through, or maybe it was something else. And so,
That was from FSEC on
Um,
their process, or was it the state?
that email string I had.
You would tell us this story, Amanda.
But somebody from the state, yeah.
The guy.
So I got,
Little.
I haven't gone into that too much, but for me, that's where I really specifics behind
Forget his
this.
gun on the floor of his car,
I know there.
and it's dark. And he turns around and turns down the gun, and he's marked.
So, what's interesting, I
Points at the gun and
don't give legal
general
advice.
direction of the gun, because the gun is dark, and shot.
A number of
Well, the guy's
landlocked
got his
groups
gun
out
in the car.
there get involved with this
Oh,
one, I
right.
think, and say,
Hello.
and they've got the
Right,
legal
very,
expertise to
very
say.
Where do you think this is gonna go?
And then I
But
said,
that plus the 3 other
it's not a
deputies
good
that I
idea,
know
because of
personally who
the,
have shot
future
people
impacts. I think that's some other sort of.
Fake
projects
guns
that owners being looked at by.
that
I mean,
they
we just
see.
had a shooting
I mean, it's because it's.
last year already, that's right,
Potential.
we're, you know,
Yeah, what if there's a fine line in one direction?
Yeah.
And the middle, like you said, we've involved.
That's why it's,
Yeah,
if
you have
something
to-
isn't productive, then
Yeah.
will probably take the water.
with the
I mean,
gun.
it is, but we've seen it. taking off.
It's hard for that police officer.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'll be excited.
But if there's a process, then we stick within the process. Now, the committee will look at if you want to improve the process, improve the criteria, to a certain, make it more, where we can truly prove that this is not gonna have negative impacts. Ranching is one, because it's a ranching zone, it's not an agricultural zone. It's not a residential zone, and that's why I feel bad for.
Hey, nice to see you too.
There's smack in the middle, gather around a corner. This is agricultural land. And all the other non-farm bonds, all the non-farm bonds are out to the west side.
Locked up there.
So you guys knew that when you moved in, but this is an ag zone. There are many uses that can be allowed. Doesn't mean there's been a guarantee.
On the.
There's a process.
And they're gonna say no, because we're gonna.
We're gonna start moving around, but there's a
The bigger, the key is to get true ranchers to be involved in
in
the
the
process.
standards, doesn't
Well,
have
it's
to
where it's at.
And I
When you're
think.
on farm bill, you're not even supposed to have a say in what ranching you have.
Right.
Noisy all night long, and then you can't sleep, and then the value goes down.
Yeah.
Those are outright.
And
regulations,
right
so
Yeah.
there's no application you have to file.
Of course.
That's what's tough about non-farm lands back in the agricultural land. They're kind of dealing with that with the junkyard out there off of 140 at Boulevard Road. And a lot of non-farm
People are
dwellings and they're all close to this, and then it's been for 8 years, to some degree. Plenty of us that have existed before a house was even built. That's where it's a hard argument to make.
I think that there's a threshold, even though it's.
They just create
Then you start to open this can of worms, which if
And I don't.
Well, like I said,
2.6%, whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah, there is.
then of course I think,
That's not.
And I don't know if we.
They'll be on the west, the south, and the east, and it's like, shoot, that's that. But, his home itself is only, front door to the other side of the road, the part out there, 80 feet. From the south side, which is his next closest property, or roughly 80 feet again, so, but then you got 50, so you're at 130. Yeah, there's probably not enough, but then you can, try to add, negotiate in a process. Bikers, you can absolutely go, yeah, we want the same thing. But it's not gonna change the fact that, yeah, you look out 3 sides of it, and you go, and that, you can't change it. What does that have to do with land value?
Right, the only way you could change it is if you say, if that land is high value.
Well, the laws already say that.
So there's way more than just the setbacks that's gotta be met.
Right.
This high, that's why I've always thought, I don't see how this.
I don't know, this ain't that.
Yeah.
That's just me looking at simple law.
Yeah, the laws is very good about irrigated flood.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you won't have nightmares about it. How are you, Pete? I know, I'm waiting for Mark's. Really?
How are you doing, man?
Good.
All right, we're coming back into session just a few minutes after 10:30. So I don't know if the press has the camera rolling, but that's okay.
He wasn't here to show it off.
Oh, really? Did he just leave it on the whole time?
You guys are eager.
I think it's running, yeah.
Okay, we'll just, it is what it is. So just to continue the discussion a little bit, I don't wanna go too much longer just based on the time. We've already been kind of circling around on this. Is there anything specific that folks wanted to discuss further?
Hey, Commissioner Williams, am right? Can you hear me coming through?
You're kind of broken up, Eric. A little echoey.
Oh boy, there you go. 1 second, I'll try to fix it.
I'm just trying to fix that. I want you all to know, I'm here for you guys, sit down, let's brainstorm if you want. I mean, come to my office anytime and we can look at stuff and, I'm here for you guys, so I'm really, you got time, you wanna come in. Truly, I'd be willing to do it after hours too, if you really wanna sit down, so.
He will too. He goes home really late. His commute is
He's got such a far commute.
yeah, right.
It's terrible.
All right, is that better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Awesome, I have to turn on the headset. Yeah, if you don't mind, Commissioners, I would just really appreciate a minute of your time just to respond to our application to be on this committee as well, if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't gotten to that point, but that's fine. I know that there were a few things that we have discussed it a little bit already, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I hear Commissioner Albertson and his comments about not wanting our participation in the committee. I would still very much appreciate the ability to be on the committee. I think that we've really been trying to do a lot of outreach in the past year. We've sent over 450 mailers out to the nearby landowners, been engaging online and via phone as much as we can. I've made a few trips down there in the past year. And I think we really are trying to engage as much as possible. And I think that not just from a perspective of we have an interest in these rules. So, we know if ands or buts about it. We are interested in getting our project built, believe it or not. But from just a general kind of solar siting background, I think that my background and my knowledge of Lake County. I know you guys spoke to wanting to try to have somebody local. I don't know if any developers are local to Lake County, but I've spent many hours of my life in the past 3 years staring at maps of Lake County, of soil maps and other setbacks. And I think that my knowledge, even in an advisory role, I think that certainly some people on the committee might view anything I say with a grain of salt. But I think that my knowledge of the solar industry and some things that the county might not, or the other members of the committee might not think of, can be useful to them. So I think that it would be still, valuable to the committee if we could be allowed to participate. And if not, I can certainly make some recommendations of some kind of regional renewable entities who might be able to, provide an advisor who are fairly knowledgeable of how different jurisdictions around Oregon and the Northwest handle matters like this that could help make sure that the information that the committee is relying on is correct and can provide good advice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Is there any other topics of direct discussion on this?
Let's just get into the who then. Huh?
Okay. So the applications that we have before us, the first one that I have is Nick Johnson from LCRI.
So just a clarification. We have some people out in the crowd here. Are they currently on the?
Yes.
Okay, so who's currently on the committee?
Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, we have Shannon Field, Pete Talbot, Amanda, Garrett, you're on the committee as well. We just have those four, correct?
What's up? But I'm
Yeah.
not-
That's what I know.
Okay. Because I'm new, I'm just.
Good question, good question.
So I understand that Nick's already on there, but were you gonna try to get on there too?
I would like to, yeah, if that would be
Yeah,
possible.
Nick's not on there, but his application is in front of us. We
Yeah.
haven't put him on there
That's
yet.
what I meant.
Right.
So,
So I emailed you Nick's response about appointing Jonathan, and he said that he would like to participate and then have Jonathan join the meetings. That's why he didn't submit an application.
Oh. Has
So-
Nick talked to you about that?
I'm unaware. No, I
Sorry.
have not had a chance to talk about that yet.
Well, when you tell him that he needs to work on his handwriting, you need to tell him he needs to work on his communication as well, so.
Fill me in on that right after this.
No worries.
So I'll let you guys talk that over and then get back to us.
Okay, that sounds good, thank you.
And the sooner the better.
Yep.
Please.
On that note though, is there any issue with having someone stand in for another committee member that we approve,
It's a public meeting.
right? So if someone isn't there, say if Nick isn't there,
He can designate a representative.
designate a representative, he could personally, okay, so. Just wanted to clarify.
Important note.
Consensus of the board, that'd be perfectly fine.
As long as they're contributing to the greater cause, not being a
Yes.
detriment,
Right, and I would hope,
or needing to get caught up and start over again.
right, so I would hope that whoever chooses their designee chooses wisely. Okay. So Nick Johnson, Natural Resources, you guys have it in front of you, is everyone comfortable with this?
Yes.
So we have to do this by motion, correct?
You should.
Yeah, and I'd like to just do them individually.
Make a motion to accept Nick Johnson from LCRI as part of our solar committee, advisory committee.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Next application. I actually may not have all the applications in front of me.
No.
Yes, I don't have that one in front of me, but that's okay, thank you. The other one that we have is, Mr. Ken Kessner. Submitted the application, was that this morning or last night? It was last night when this came in.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, okay.
I'll make a motion to accept Ken Kessler as part of the advisory committee. Solar advisory committee.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. So the next application in front of us, we have is Obsidian. And we have three applications left. We have Blue Marmot, actually, let's go with EDP Renewables, Eric Desmarius. Eric spoke on the phone a little bit about wanting to be on the committee. One of the thoughts that I had on this, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I've kind of gone back and forth on this. Blue Marmot is very unique in the sense that they are looking at solar development on irrigated farmland. Obsidian is not. I don't believe Obsidian even has any projects anywhere on irrigated farmland. But the purpose of this committee is to look at, or one of the goals of the committee is to look at solar development on irrigated farmland and basically what the issues are with that. So if you wanted to have a full round of discussion, this is just me looking at this as carefully as I can. It would make sense to have someone who is actually looking at irrigated farmland being turned into solar production, at least having a voice on either on the committee or present. Now, I know there's nothing preventing EDP Renewables or Eric Desmarius from attending these meetings anyway, although it would be I can see the utility in say, being that we have actually designated, making it a goal. It's not just about solar development. We talked about the fact that corner pivots and everything else. We're not trying to just stop solar development. One of the issues for this board of commissioners, if I'm reading the tea leaves right, is we unanimously have a serious issue with solar on irrigated farmland. There's only one company that's actually currently looking to do that. And that's the application. An application is in front of us from Eric Desmarius from EDP Renewables. So I guess the question from the board in approving this, I know I'm having the discussion before there's even a motion on the table, but I just thought I'd kind of throw that out for a little bit of discussion.
You know, I have not met with Obsidian and have not talked to anybody from Obsidian. I have talked to EDP. They've reached out to me and we had a Zoom meeting a while back, so I have met Eric. I think he's an honest person. I also think that if he wants to give input to this committee, he can do so. But I don't necessarily know that he needs to be on the committee. That's my comment.
With that, I guess if you want to, I wasn't sure if you.
So I've also spoke with Eric. I've told him my thoughts, and I haven't seen any effort to do anything to appease the community or our concerns with solar on irrigated farm ground. And so I would not vote for them to be on our committee or recommend they be on our committee. So, my personal opinion, so.
Got it. No worries. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion on the application from Eric Desmarius. Is there a motion to deny or approve?
Motion dies.
Well, there's not even a motion to deny.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Okay, motion to deny the application from Eric Desmarius to the Solar Advisory Committee. Is there a second to deny the application?
You get a second.
Well, I just was curious if there was a second to deny the application.
I'll second.
Okay, motion been made, seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay. Motion carries. Eric, you're more than welcome to join, but you are not on the committee as a board member. Just for follow up from my point of view, just to explain why I voted yay. I voted yay. I voted nay, correct. Sorry. I voted yay on the nay. I'm kind of going, I went rounds on this. I just don't know if I personally feel there's any issue with having the conversation and having a fully rounded conversation, but I'm more than happy with the board's decision. I just had to vote how I kind of was feeling at the time. So, next application in front of us, Obsidian. We have two. This is kind of interesting because it's the same organization making the application. The two different people representing the same company. I met Lori Hutchison. I've spoken with her. That's the application in front of us at the moment. Is there well, I'll just entertain a motion.
So,
Give us some background on who she
So,
is.
Okay,
can I,
Lori's on the phone.
yeah, Lori is on the phone. Actually, Lori, would you like to speak up a little bit? You've given you really didn't give any comments on the application as to why you would like to be on the committee. Maybe if you could just kind of help the board and kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see all of you. I wish I could be there. So yeah, I wanted to echo what I think Barry was getting at, Commissioner Barry was getting at with, there is a lot going on with the renewable energy industry, not just solar, and I expect that even solar will change in the next several years. So I do think that there is a good point to bringing on some solar and developer perspective for information on where the industry is going, how things are moving, what are the regional drivers, why do we make the choices that we make. So I think that there is a good point to, whether you decide to take those opinions or not, there is a good point to considering what makes solar projects go, why is Lake County attractive, what are the drivers outside of Lake County that are making things happen. So that's the pitch I would make for having someone from the industry on the board, whether however you choose to weigh those opinions. Since Elaine wasn't able to be on the phone, I did not know that Elaine was putting in her application as an Obsidian representative. One thing I would, whether you choose to vote to have Elaine on the committee or not, I think it would be interesting to get her perspective because she just went through a very similar process with Klamath County, and some of the things that I think in particular James brought up have also, that kind of reared its head as Klamath County was considering its potential ordinance change, and that's namely, you want to make sure that you don't restrict, say, a farmer or a rancher from being able to do behind-the-meter solar with the same rules that apply to utility-scale solar, the kind of projects that we build. So there's a little bit of sticky, just careful thinking that needs to be applied to make sure that you're, sort of keeping the utility scale solar projects in their bucket and what private landowners want to do to offset their own power bills might want to do. So we don't want to get into having how we regulate our kind of projects and Blue Marmot's kind of projects impact farmers and ranchers in a way that's not welcome. So I'll just put that out there as to, Elaine does represent us for the Obsidian Solar Center project, but she also, she represents OSEA, the State Solar Industry Association. So you might consider her either as, whether or not she's on the committee separately as a resource. And I think most of you, except for Barry, know me pretty well. I'm happy to weigh in more on the kind of information we can bring, but I've had long discussions with James and some pretty decent discussions with Mark. And of course, Darwin knows me from 10 years back. And yeah, we're happy to bring our perspective. We really appreciate working in Lake County, and we certainly want to see that continue to be a benefit to both Lake County and to renewable energy in general.
Thank you. I'll entertain the motion.
I make a motion to have Ms. Lori Hutchinson be on the committee.
second?
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
So,
Oh, sorry.
I
Well, you can have discussion. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask Lori, are you guys part of the Langell Valley project, Klamath County?
Say that again?
Are you guys part of the solar project going in Langeau Valley in Klamath County?
No, we're not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Because that would have changed my vote.
Okay.
I'll have to follow up with you on that.
Yeah, I know where he was going with that too, but yeah, alright. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Last one is application from Elaine Albright. You have a letter from her in front of you attached to the document. Being that Elaine isn't here and able to speak for you guys, we don't have to we don't have to appoint her or not appoint her. If we can leave this out there, whatever you guys choose to do, but we can also act on it and say no, and she's still more than welcome to attend and give comment.
So Elaine isn't representing Obsidian.
No.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
She is coming in and under her own law firm, or under their law firm,
Correct.
which could give us some legal aspects to.
Plus what Ms. Hutchison said about the prior experience in Clinton County.
She's very knowledgeable. I think she would bring legal expertise, and she's gone through the process with these large projects. I think she would be valuable, but that's just my 2 cents.
Any input from the current committee?
It, I mean, just based on what we just heard, it sounds like she also represents the solar industry.
She
She
does.
knows.
Yes.
Obviously would bring a lot of background.
Have you guys worked with her in the past?
Yes, a bunch.
I think I may have mentioned this before, but one of the original solar projects that was approved, and the only goal exception that we had was she and another attorney represented Element Power on that Poplar Ranch Park stuff. So
She would have that insight.
yeah, so she's been with different solar companies. She's worked with different ones, and she may represent others still besides Obsidian, but she's definitely in a real law firm and works on.
Right. Yeah, she is not requesting to join on behalf of Obsidian. My mistake in how I worded that. I think she does represent Obsidian in other matters. So for me to, when I looked at these both coming across my desk, that was just how my mind drew the conclusion. So I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept Elaine Albright as part of our solar advisory committee.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So, with that, we have several other topics for discussion on our.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask, is there any other solar comments from our committee?
I guess this is Laurie on the phone. I have one more question or comment. I didn't quite follow being on the phone. Are there some other locals who are in the room who are also going to be on the committee?
Yes.
Okay. So I understood that Nick and Ken are both on the committee. Are there more people?
Yes. There are 4 people that we've already priorly approved for the committee. So we'll send out an email and everything else with all the names of the approved members on the committee, so I don't have to go through everyone's name. That's something up.
Be a committee of 8, is that what we're looking at?
That's what we have so far.
So far, we have 8. We could have 9, there's nothing to restrict us from an additional application.
Let's go.
Really, yeah, right now we're at 9. It's been a committee of 4 for some weeks now, so.
Okay, gotcha.
There was.
I was gonna say, that sounds like we're, from what I saw on the phone, it looked like it was heavy on outsiders and, you know, there was a lot of valuable stuff coming from the room. So that seems more balanced to have, more local voices, so that
Yeah.
we are balancing what solar
Right,
development wants versus, you know, what the locals' experience is. So I applaud that, that's great.
yes, all the other, the previous 4 board members, our committee members are in the room, and they've.
Yeah, Fantastic. Yeah, it's weird. I can only see the front of the room. I can't see the back of the room.
So Commissioner and Chair Williams.
Yes.
It's been previously discussed too about the planning commission's role.
Thank you,
And
I was gonna go there next.
instead of appointing just 1 or 2 members of the planning commission, that it's gonna be held in front of the planning commission. So,
Correct,
you know, I think as we get into the sideboards, you know, we'll kind of go over how voting will be. That would put it at 15 with the 7-member planning commission, these 8 members. So, you know, whether it's
That's
unanimous or it's just a majority vote, again, the planning commission makes the ultimate recommendation to the board of commissioners who then, you know, seek approval through the state as well.
This committee works under the planning commission.
Yeah, this committee will
under the,
side
with the
by
planning
side.
commission, planning director
Yeah.
to be a mediator, so to speak, with the
And at
planning.
this point, we've set up for, you know, a kickoff meeting, again, January 19th at 5 o'clock. We only have 1 normal agenda item that night, 1 land use application, so we might go back into it after the 6 o'clock start for that 1 item and minutes too, but, you know, I would anticipate it being a bit longer than just the first hour. We'll probably get right back into it. And then the planning commission did agree to have more than 1 meeting a month. Normally they just meet once on the 3rd Tuesday of each month, but if we wanna, you know, keep it moving, we can. We'll discuss that as we get into the meetings.
And we originally kind of went with having it kind of joined with the planning commission, because with the whole commission instead of 1 person from the commission. Because there's so many different perspectives on the planning, different folks that have different perspectives on these things. It's just good to have that fully rounded discussion, especially with the full planning commission that deals with land use all the time. So,
The only other remaining voice that I know I've heard from before that really wanted to serve on this was Justin Farrell. And so I know
correct.
an application's been sent to him, but it may come a point later on that you want to appoint Justin to the group as well.
Right.
Either way, we're
Thanks,
gonna reach out and ask for his.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, we have had that discussion where we wanted someone from soil and water conservation. So.
And I'm gonna be inviting, you know, just as it's, you know, this meeting's already been published in the paper, it will be maybe tomorrow. But, you know, it's got a link for a call-in as well.
Okay.
So everybody doesn't have to be in the room, but I'd appreciate it as much who wants to social distance and wear a mask to come, but.
Alright, sounds good.
And I'll send an email with, you know, some background information for everybody too within the next week.
Perfect. Make sure you get everyone's contact info too.
I'll do it.
With that, we're gonna move on. Everyone's welcome to stay, hang out, as we go through the rest of our agenda, but I think the solar discussion for today is pretty much kind of done, so thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you guys coming. Next item is EOCA IGA. Eastern Oregon Counties Association Intergovernmental Agreement. Thank you, Darwin.
So very, Commissioner Schulenberg, do you know about EOCA, which would you like us to explain a little better?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just a little background there.
So
And then,
EOCA is the Eastern Oregon Association of Counties. We also belong to the Association of Oregon Counties, which encompasses the whole state. EOCA kind of focuses more on Eastern Oregon problems and issues. Sage grouse, timber, forest, public land stuff. We have, Eastern Oregon has their own lobbyist, Rocky Down, right? Is that how you pronounce his last
I've just called him Rocky, honestly, I haven't used his last name
And
since I met him.
he's pretty much a rock star as far as lobbyist goes for us. And so we're more focused on Eastern Oregon. We haven't belonged to Eastern Oregon counties before because the previous boards had thought that we we're covered enough with Association of Oregon Counties. I really feel like there's a need to be in both. And I talked to Gina Nickel, who's the director of Association of Oregon Counties, talked to her about Eastern Oregon Counties Association. And she said it would be very valuable for us to be part of them also. And so that's my 2 cents. I didn't know if you wanted to
Yeah,
add anything.
I can add in a little bit. Yeah, previously, like Commissioner Albertson said, the lobbyist for both AOC and EOCA was the same person. Rocky has taken the reins on the EOCA side, and he is, like Mark said, a rock star. He's done really well for us, and he's a great advocate, and works very closely, keeps us informed. I think there was a lot of struggle previously with the former lobbyist. Not to throw him under the bus or anything, but it was just good to have an additional voice. And because Eastern Oregon is unique, we have a lot of different types of issues that are not normal or even begun to be understood by some of the folks on the other side of the state. And we get lost in the shuffle sometimes, just based on our population. And it's just great to have that voice where we can kind of come together and as a group and talk. It is a little bit of money. The membership is about $10,000 a year. So belonging to 2 associations, you kind of have to be careful that you're not spending a bunch of money just being members of different clubs, so to speak. But EOCA, I don't really feel is so much as a public club. The downside to EOCA is it does tend to be Eastern Oregon centric because Eastern Oregon is unique. There are a couple counties on the other side of the state that are very rural counties that feel that would love to be part of our group, so to speak, and be part of EOCA, partly because they just identify with us in a lot of our rural issues. And that's always been the kind of the rub is it east versus west, is it rural versus urban, and you can get lost in that conversation, honestly.
Yes.
So I'm just having the discussion. Okay, fine. I won't add anything, right? But EOCA, I really feel it's valuable. We put off actually finalizing this IGA until you were able to be on the board, so that you could be at least part of the discussion and kind of look at the IGA before we accepted another year-long agreement with them.
I appreciate that. What's our current fees for AOC?
It's like 16,000.
Just shy of 17,000, but they're talking about restructuring that, and I think
Yeah.
you guys should keep that in mind, that it might
Yes.
also increase significantly if their proposed structure is approved.
Any one of them, actually. They have several options on the table.
Yeah.
One of them is bad for us, one is really bad for us. I don't think there's a favorable one for Lake County. Honestly, I've gone back and forth with that discussion, not to go too far into that. We should probably actually get that on the agenda for some discussion, maybe in the next work session, because it is a big topic at AOC, and there's a lot of concerns over the new due structure and how that's going to look at AOC. Some counties are not very happy at all. They're not impossible for us to stomach, either one. In fact, where I was originally was going back and forth on which one I chose, because I could see where it was good for some counties and bad for others, and I was just looking at it for what was best for Lake County, which is default for us in our position. But I saw our neighboring counties, if I had voted to choose what was best for us, some of our neighboring counties were gonna be in a really tight pickle, because it just didn't seem to be fair, at least one of the options in front of us and how they chose to structure.
Alright, well, I'm just,
Something to keep in mind.
to belong to two associations that are doing similar work. I know it probably is frustrating to be on AOC and not hear Eastern Oregon issues, or have people that are leading that group and not understand Eastern Oregon issues. So I understand why this is before us, because these guys are focused, just on Eastern Oregon. The question is, hopefully we're being represented just as well, and maybe we need to consider in the future of picking one. Do we really need to spend $27,000, $30,000 to belong to two? Is there a point there where we say, okay, AOC, thank you, but no thank you, or do we need to stick with AOC because they represent the whole state?
And our county insurance and everything else is tied into it and everything else. So if you're gonna choose one, if we're kind of
So
stuck
keep
with
it
AOC.
Yeah.
We're kind of stuck with AOC in a lot of ways. And if someone could find a way out around it,
Well, the only way around that part would be,
not that I have any issue with AOC,
Right.
just to verify.
so like Deschutes County is self-insured because they have enough money to be so, we don't. And so we're stuck with city, county, and insurance, which has been nothing but a blessing to us, to be honest. Is, Jay Collins is our human resources guys. On the phone with them, I would say at least daily, if not more.
Right.
The city, county.
So AOC definitely has its upside.
Right.
And,
Definitely.
and
we need to have.
AOC has been going through growing pains. I think we're on the right track to becoming way better.
We got a new director last
The
year.
director, she's part of our Eastern Oregon calls, Gina is on there, and she would recommend, like I stated before, she would recommend us being part of both. I get where you're going with, we should probably pick one, but I think right now, we almost have to pick two because just the issues we're dealing with almost on a daily basis on Eastern Oregon.
You feel we'd be missing out if we weren't part of the OCA?
Very much so. And
Is that for economic development? Is that for policy?
virtually
Support.
everything. I mean-
Forestry issues are a big one, sage grouse, and
See, we have all the public land on this, right? And so AOC, yes, we have a natural resources committee, but you have people on that committee that they're not 78% publicly owned.
And they're also dealing with ONC lands and everything else where you just don't have the same topics of discussion over here. And a lot of the times the at AOC, it's not that the commissioners are not willing to have some of these conversations, but the chair, the vice chair of some of these committees, AOC, Natural Resources, they're all from the western portion of the state, and they're looking at the issues that they run into in terms of ONC lands and things like that, and how that looks. So when we're looking at coming up with new forestry plans for managing the forests over, and whether it's in the Blue Mountains or here, it's always just the conversations are so much different than EOC land.
And I understand why they have to they haven't raised the due structure for a long time.
At AOC.
At AOC. And what happens is you get behind and then you have to raise it dramatically to get caught up. And which we've seen with our railroad, with this town of Lakeview's water problems. I mean, if you don't stay up on it, pretty soon you're making a 25% increase on stuff. I virtually am on the phone with AOC, somebody from AOC virtually every day or several times a week, and I'm sure Commissioner Williams is too. But also the reason they're changing the due structure is because I'll use Multnomah County. So they pay the most, right? And so
between them and Washington County.
right. And so what happens is that if everybody in the Association of Oregon Counties, but Multnomah and Washington County want something, AOC doesn't want to say anything because they're paying their biggest
Contributor.
And so this evens it out more, so we have a more more even keel on the voting structure
With EOC.
with AOC.
Okay, so just to be clear then, if we accept EOCA, the main thing is we're getting more Eastern Oregon topics that we're discussing, that they're supporting us for.
And working with those commissioners and just subjects and working with Rocky on what we're actually lobbying for, what we're pushing for, the voices that we have, whether it's at the state capitol or back in DC.
So you guys feel it's pretty important to belong to both?
I do.
I
mean, I get the financial.
Yeah.
I get it. But I also realize, is it worth what we're trying to accomplish? And I have to say yes, as far as we get a vote on what we want Rocky to do as far as the state capitol lobbying for us or at Washington DC lobbying for us. So, and we're right now, Lake County is the only Eastern Oregon county that doesn't have a vote. They tolerate us, but we can't vote on anything.
So we're potentially taking these guys on EOCA, and we also know that AOC is probably gonna bump their dates.
Mhm.
So we're gonna be looking at money to be belong to both. And we have to have AOC.
Right. We're looking at about $30,000 in membership fees.
We can afford that.
You can afford it right now, yes. Melanie, you're looking at me.
I mean, it's a hard decision. I mean,
Because
What's the commitment, 1 year?
Yes. And that's the other thing, is that we can look at this in another year, and we can just say, we're really not getting anything out of it, but we've decided to go in another direction. And we can just say, we're gonna step out, we're gonna rely on the AOC more closely. We're still friends with you guys, we still work with you and everything else, but AOC is going to be the main group that we kind of go through. We're gonna rely on their lobbyists and everything else. But again, they're lobbyists and their opinions and their what they're going to push for and what they're going to advocate for is largely at times dictated by other politics that are well beyond Lake County and the best interests of Lake County.
Well, being new, I want all the tools in the toolbox to be successful.
Yeah.
And, you're convincing me that we need this tool. So I probably am in favor of it. But certainly we'll be watching it, determining
Definitely should.
what the future needs are.
And two, one commissioner might use a certain tool more than another. And I'm just saying for my own personal thing is I use them both and I think they're both very valuable. And I totally get, I don't want to spend money, but if we're gonna have any kind of voice at all right now, I think we need both. So,
Can I note that we paid these dues in July for both communities, and we've already paid for EOCA this fiscal year.
Oh, it will. Well, we haven't approved this at all.
We have not approved the IGA, this is new, but we have paid the dues.
Because we made adjustments, that the EOCA made adjustments, so this is
Yeah.
amending the actual.
So, I mean, we can keep it in the front of our brains of how the due structures might change, and I can build it into our budget.
So you are voting.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize.
When you said it, I was thinking to myself that we actually, I believe we're already members, that we already.
We joined in July.
We joined in July.
Copy.
It was middle of COVID. I remember that, yeah. Because I know I voted on one of the last calls, and but I just didn't want to interrupt you, sorry.
I'm just going back in time.
Alright,
It's been a year. A lot's happened. But we do have, we can relook at all of our memberships closer to July and make some decisions then based on how our revenue forecasts are looking. We'll get more information from Dave Knowles on his predictions for central assessed utilities, and that has a big impact on our budgets. Lottery funds and how that's looking.
EOCA is not planning on upping their membership fees though.
Not to my knowledge.
No, I haven't heard anything about them upping or increasing their fees of any kind or changing their due structure. The due structure conversation was entirely coming from AOC.
So since we're already members, we're up for discussion today is approving the IGA.
So, do you want to,
Okay, sure, I'll entertain a motion.
or do you want to say this?
Oh, that's right. Very good point. It's not on for action consideration. We have to set this for tomorrow. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm getting ahead of myself there.
We are kind of stuck on whether we like it or not with AOC, if we want to have insurance, so.
It's an interesting topic, yeah. And I think Commissioner Schulenberger, as you could kind of work with AOC, as you kind of get to know some of the staff and are talking with them, I think some of the commissioners that were there before, they're no longer there. I don't think, a couple of them actually, they lost their election. But I had some conversation with them in the last 2 years about this particular subject, and it would definitely be of utility to have some of the discussion with the staff at AOC as it pertains to county insurance and how that came about, the history of it, and then maybe even cross that conversation over with a few of the other commissioners that you develop relationships with, and ask them what their thoughts are on it. I think it's you might get frustrated, might find it interesting, who knows, but I think there may be some decisions in the future that we may need to look at pertaining to exactly that subject.
So speaking of your AOC, you're gonna participate in the county college, right? And are those all gonna be virtual? Or
Is that the last one? September. Finally get to meet each other live.
Is that was the best thing about county college was just the networking amongst.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird. It's too bad. Maybe things will change quickly, who knows? We'll see. Maybe we can coach them to change. Alright, what we got next?
Yep. Next one up is liaison assignments. We'll just zip through this, and then we'll probably have to go into our executive session with Jim Bailey. He's gonna be available by 11. So maybe if you wanna send him a text while we have this discussion, get him on the phone. Because we will be going into executive session under 92.6602H. Not yet.
No, it is all.
Oh, okay.
This is kind of.
But anyway, so liaison assignments for 2021.
So can I make a request or not a request?
Sure. Whatever.
A comment.
Sure.
So I've been thinking about the liaison thing a lot, and my thought is that we abolish the liaisons. And the reason for that is I think it creates division with the county employees, the department heads, and the commissioners. I feel that if we create liaisons and I want to go visit with somebody that you're a liaison, they're the liaison, I feel like I'm stepping on your toes and getting involved in your business. And I think it just frees it up where any county employee or any department head can come to one of us at any time and not feel the pressure that they're not meeting with their liaison. That way it also gives us the freedom to go whatever direction we feel like we need. And so my recommendation is, have the liaison list, and so we don't drop the ball on somebody and lose somebody in the cracks, but not be appointed to a specific liaison. That way, if you get information on any subject that you want to go after, you go after it.
Right.
If it's not your thing, you say, hey, I don't know much about this subject. Would one of you guys want to roll with it? And it just gives us more freedom. It doesn't create division amongst anyone. And that's the one thing I want to completely work on this year is the unity of our county, of our employees, of our commissioners, and get us back into the county family that we could all be proud of. So that's my thought on liaison.
I know Mr. Greer has thoughts, but just an initial thought, Commissioner Robertson. Let's say we go with that, and then let's say everybody's comfortable going to everybody but me, and now I'm the person that nobody's visiting. how is that transparency across commissioners being viewed? Or let's say, one of the three of us becomes the go-to person and the other two are left out. How do we deal with that?
So my thought on that would be is, one thing that I've learned is in business and fatherhood and everything else is you have to know your limitations and you not have to be able to say, no, Mom, I can't do this. I have a million things. I'll help you, but if there's somebody else that you go to, I'd appreciate it, you know, and I get what you're saying, but, I think the more people get, using you as an example, the more people get to know you, the more they'll wanna use you. And let's just face it, I might not be able to reach so-and-so because of personality conflicts. I'm just being straight up. James might work better with somebody than I do. It's just like the committee on the prison. Use that. I couldn't be that person, right? Because Governor Brown and she doesn't appreciate me. And so I willingly said, no, I want to try to save our prison. I'm not the guy to be on that committee. And so we have to take those things into account when we're doing these things.
So I see where you're coming at for, in this building type liaison stuff, but we also got stuff outside of this building, such as the Lake County Fire Defense Board, the Air Quality Group,
Economic development.
natural resources with all the federal agencies. There's all these outside ones where we still need to have probably a representative, don't you think?
Well, I agree with that.
That was
And I would be happy with that.
that was the thought I actually had, was having a list of the actual departments that we have here in the building and outside, whether it be mental health or whatever else, that they come to the commissioners and they have an issue, any one of us should be able to talk to. But there are going to be those individual committees, like for the prison, or say the vehicle committee, different things like that, where there's a commissioner designated to sit on that. It's really kind of an interesting subject, because one of the things that we kind of struggle with as commissioners is we don't really fully round ourselves. We did have discussion about rotating liaisons and having a list and then rotating it every year. We didn't do that this last year, so we ended up having the same liaisons for 2 years in a row. As a result of that, I'll tell you, one of the things there's a couple of your liaisons and a couple of the other liaisons that I have no experience with, for the same reason that you pointed out. I'm not the liaison, and I'm worried about stepping on someone else's toes by getting involved too closely. So if a community member comes to me and asks, what do you know about this? And what are your thoughts on this? I have no idea. I've never even dealt with that before, because that's been one commissioner's deal. So as a commissioner, we're not fully rounding ourselves in actual full county operations. And it's one of the things that's kind of frustrated me personally. But to your point, the utility in having a designated person, say, on a particular issue or account committee, or like the fire defense board, whatever it might be, that has utility, and you like to have that go-to person, like that's the person we want. But I think some of this might actually even be fixed by us having better discussion, and us having, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly work sessions where we have good discussion on it. Honestly, Melanie and I were talking about having weekly 20-minute powwow, whether it be Monday or Friday, work session, open to the public, anyone can come in, but we have to sit down and we just say, okay, so how was last week? What's next week look like? What's our goals? Where are we headed? So at least we're working as a team.
Discussion?
Jake?
I don't disagree with you at all, Commissioner Robinson, on opening the gates. But Commissioner Schilberg is absolutely right. I'm a creature of habit. I'm gonna find that one person that I'm comfortable sitting down with and explaining. But I take it a step further. I also don't wanna sit in that hot seat and be bombarded with a bunch of curveballs from the other two. So I'm a creature of habit. I sit down with all three when it's big issues. When it's something small, I don't wanna waste anybody's time. Just get that box checked and move on. But I see in years past, over my 8 years, where there was some territory issues. I think with the new board, and power hour transparency, because we have new, back bad words, we needs to be filled in on everything. I think I'm comfortable with the liaison, just from my standpoint, because I sit down with all three of you anyway, or I have when it comes to big issues. And Commissioner Shawn, retired Commissioner Shawn, set the tone for me on that, because he would always say what the other two say. If you talk to the other two. I mean, that was the first words I was, before he talked to me, he talked to the other two. Because he knew he wasn't my liaison, and he knew Commissioner Keshner wasn't, Commissioner Winters was. I always started with Commissioner Winters and went right down the hall. So, from a comfort standpoint, because I may be working with Commissioner Schoenberger on something, he's out for a week. Now I have to sit down and try and figure out where we were moving forward so I can get in here and get it approved with Commissioner Schoenberger not here. I'm now trying to educate everybody. Commissioner Schoenberger comes back and he's missed the last leg of it. It's just for comfort. I'm just one of 15 department heads, so
personally, you would like to keep the liaison.
I would like to keep the liaison.
What do you think?
I work with all three of you, so it doesn't impact me as much. I see some divisiveness, but then I think maybe you could keep the liaisons, but then elaborate to the department heads and set your expectations. Hey, this is your contact person, but you need to do your due diligence to communicate better with all three of us. But I see both ways. I see the division, and I think that could be fixed. And I think
Do you think it could be fixed without just having it the way it is, or does it need to stay the way it is and we can fix that and streamline it better so we don't create that diversity or that divisiveness?
I think it can be fixed, and I think the message needs to come from the board. There needs to be a clear message, because there really has never been a clear message from the board to department heads in 8 years. Yes, I am your liaison, but I'm not your only liaison.
Now,
We need to know what's going on. And it's important to me, especially in my role, with budgets being up and down and where I'm at, that everybody knows what's going on. So there needs to be a strong message from the top down, because that message has never been heard. The only thing I've ever heard is, I'm your liaison, you work for me. If I'm not here, you can go.
So, your power meeting or whatever.
I said powwow, just for the record.
Powwow.
I said powwow, just to correct you, Jake. I did not say power hour. I did not say power hour. Okay,
So
powwow.
what if on those powwows that we could
This is a
have,
work session.
we could have all of our department heads there and that they could feed us in whatever's going on with them and
Well, and that was the whole, we have a department head meeting set up regularly, first Monday of every month at 8 o'clock. Commissioner Schiller came in yesterday and introduced himself. It's just a time for us department heads to talk about what's happening within the county, what am I struggling with in my department, what you seen in your department, that kind of thing. It's not to bash commissioners at all. And that'd be a good time for individual commissioners to come in and maybe at the end of it, give us some updates, give us what you're thinking, tell us what you're thinking. And then James can come in the next month and tell us what he's thinking, and Barry just mix it up. But, part of the commissioner meetings, when you both first started, department heads had department head updates. We're supposed to be coming as department heads. We're supposed to be coming before the board updating the commissioners. That's petered off. I haven't seen that at all.
Right.
The last several months. Not shame on the board, shame on us department heads for not following up and following through.
It's on the agenda. We typically like to have department head updates, but yeah. And
I'm guilty. I haven't thrown my name out there. But I have sit down sessions with everybody, so everybody knows what's going on in my world. So that's a good time right there for us, not just to toot our horn or make our life brighter, but educate, for lack of better words, educate the board of commissioners on what's happening in our world, good and bad, and what we're looking forward for in the future. I mean, what we have to look forward to in the future, moving forward. So there's a lot that the board can discuss, but there needs to be a consensus, so it comes down to us department heads. We don't have 12 ways of doing things. We have 12 different department heads doing different things.
Well, the same token, you don't want 3 different commissioners doing 3 different things either. We need to be a team as well. So one of the advantages, I have no problem with, I really like the idea of the department heads coming together and you guys having a discussion outside of a commissioners meeting, so to speak, where a commissioner isn't even necessarily present, where you guys can talk about the department head issues and kind of deal with some of those things internally. And then if you want a commissioner to come in and give you guys an update and you give us an update individually, that's perfectly fine. Though I would say I'd also like to do that the other way around with if we're gonna have a little work session where we're not just sitting up here, maybe we're just sitting down there at the table or something, on level ground. We just meet 20 minutes in the morning. This is what we're doing. This is what we got going on, and we have one department head come in and give us an update each time. And that way we get something new, and department heads are more than welcome to join us as many as they want.
The only problem with that is that we can't all 3 be here.
For a work session, they could.
No, we would notice it,
We would
take
notice
minutes, and
It would
I
be
would not be able to travel ever.
No, that's not true.
And instead of putting it on us department heads to get with Melanie, just schedule us.
Yeah.
Tell me, I'm up January 25th. I need to be in the commissioners meeting for a department update. Just tell me I need to be here, and I'll be here.
We could do that, just have different ones, 2 or 3 every work session.
Yeah, that's fine.
Set those expectations. Tell us you want us to do an update every quarter or something,
I
Give
do.
us that responsibility.
I definitely want updates at least every quarter.
I think if we had 2 or so each meeting, 2 department heads, then we would just rotate through and cover everybody.
And that way everybody's on the same page, everybody's hearing the same information. Although the liaison, Mark, if you were my liaison, you would already know this stuff that I'm presenting, so it's not foreign to you. But everybody's hearing the same message.
I mean, I'm fine with everything. The whole purpose of me wanting to do, just have it wide open, is to not create
Silos.
Yeah, and not, I want to create a unity not only amongst our department heads with each other and our employees with each other, but with the commissioners with each other and the commissioners with the whole unit. And because it seems to me there's been such a separation over the years that we're going to have to work really hard to get back to where I feel we need to be as far as unity and acting as one unit. I don't think any of us know what to expect from you or know what to expect from me or, you know, and I think, you know, I talked to you a little bit about it before you had that meeting this week. My expectations as a commissioner for the department heads and for the other county employees, and I'll just, since I'm talking about it, I'll just give a brief of what I expect. What I expect is we're on an even keel. You come to me for whatever you want to at any time for any reason. You can argue with me to your heart's desire about a certain subject and give me all the data that you have. Give me everything. But once I make a decision, you run with that like it was your own idea. Unless you have other information that's going to persuade me otherwise. Why I say that is because if I make a decision and then I hear you grumbling out in the hall about it, pisses me off. And that creates division. Argue with me beforehand, but you can't argue with me after. And I mean, it's just a ground rule that I have. I mean,
Well, I guess you get to the, Dad said no, so go ask Mom.
Yeah.
We don't want that either.
no.
That just comes, I mean, that's just common courtesy, that's just respect.
Right, but you know, a lot of people don't know that. And
It is unspoken. We need to voice that.
but we're on an even keel. You can argue with me on a certain subject as much as you want, but have the data. Sometimes I'm gonna go with your idea and sometimes I'm not. But those times that I don't wanna ever hear anything about it again. Because that means you're talking behind my back. And I don't want anybody talking about anybody behind their back. They should, if you have a problem with somebody, you should talk to that person, step one. Step two, if it doesn't resolve the issue, you go to their department head. If that doesn't work, you come to the commissioners. That's the only time I want to hear about it. I do not want to hear about it at the Indian Village. And I don't want to hear about it at the grocery store. So there's a certain way to handle a grievance with each other. And if you don't show those persons that respect, I'm gonna be pissed. And I can guarantee you right now, I will not tolerate any kind of bad mouthing or gossip anymore. And if I hear about it, I will personally talk to you, whoever that is. And so, and the reason I'm saying that is all it does is create division. And we cannot have that. We cannot operate that way any longer. And so, sorry I got on my soapbox, but that's just the way it is. So.
You guys have been down a road I haven't been down. Obviously, you got some bumps in the road there that you'd like to get smoothed out in the future, and you know I'm all for that. So, but I'd like to get some clarity on what we want to do with this.
Yeah, and I'm fine. That was the purpose of me not wanting to do the liaisons but if we can all work together, and I have no problem with doing this. I just want our employees to know, just because we're a liaison doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to the other commissioner. Matter of fact, it's just the opposite. You should be filling them in also. And I don't want to step on my other two commissioners' toes if I start running with something.
You've
And
never,
maybe we need to discuss if I want to go with something out of the airport. Just bringing it before you guys and say, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to step on any toes. Just you know, and if we could show each other that common courtesy also, where it doesn't create division amongst us, because you know it's hard to run anything when you have 3 people have to do,
right?
you know, and So we as a board really have to think about our comments, not only to the public, but to each other and how that's gonna affect our relationship. And, you know, we just gotta mutually respect each other's boundaries and time and just I just wanna communicate those things better amongst the board.
So let's go through a scenario real quick. Mr. Greer comes and briefs you. Are you gonna brief us? Or is that up to Mr. Greer to do?
It should be up to Mr. Greer
I'm gonna take on
because
that responsibility, that's my responsibility.
you know how things are.
I don't think that's clear.
We
What I've
can't,
understood.
it's hard for us, whenever there's two of us in the same room, that can be construed as a public meeting. And so that's
We can't make any decision.
We can't make decisions, we can't deliberate towards the decision, and that's really difficult to do, even when you're just intending, with the best intentions, going in and trying to give an update.
Okay, well, I just think we need to let all the department heads know that they really need to brief all three of us.
Yeah.
And not just go to the lead, because I think there is some of that perception that, hey, I went to my lead and they're not telling me. You know, I picked up on some of that.
Well, and you know how it is when you have a conversation, especially like with me, being half deaf. And what Jake, what's his name? Mr. Greer.
I heard him say half something.
What he might say, I don't wanna misconstrue it, and by the time it gets
Twist it.
to the third guy, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah,
That's
I heard
why
this.
they have to tell you the same thing.
Okay.
And,
But that could be done before a meeting, and that could be done during department head updates. It doesn't need to happen every day or every week.
No.
Right.
But major decisions, I mean, that's what I was, Commissioner Shannon stressed that with me. If it's a major decision, everybody needs to know before we come to the meeting, or get ready to get holes poked in you.
Okay, so we can come up with some good talking points and a message out to
Right.
And we have department head meetings. That'd be a good time for someone to come in and just say,
Yeah.
this is where we're going as a board, but we know they can convey that message. Somebody convey that message to the department head.
Okay.
So we're all.
To answer your question though, I don't know if we're actually ready to make any kind of decision on this today, so I don't want the board to feel pressured to make a decision exactly what we're going to do with this liaison list. I think we got some pretty good consensus from the board as to how we all feel. I agree with both of your perspectives, really good thoughts. So we don't have to act on this per se, this sheet, and start redesignating or anything else, but what we should do is probably work on some messaging. That's kind of where we want to go right now, to make sure that we're giving some good solid messaging to the department heads.
and you know, in your guys' department head meetings, I wanna know how I can do my job better.
All about it.
I know you will. But I really truly wanna know that. And I might argue with you, but
But again, Commissioner, it's not a bashing session. We don't come in.
We know that.
we know that.
We know, I'm not worried
What I'm
about that at
saying
all.
is, I wanna know, you know.
So the one thing across the whole county that's gonna clean a lot of things up, and you talk about unity, communication,
Yeah.
transparency. Those two things come and go. They're absent one day, they're prevalent the next day. We need to focus on that, on every level, from the bottom up and the top down. So as long as that's happening, there shouldn't be, you should know exactly how you're doing what other department heads are thinking besides myself or Nick.
I know what you think it will be.
I have never had any issue whatsoever with you or any commissioner going to any of my liaisons at any point in time. I've never felt like you guys were stepping on my toes or anything like that, and you've only just been here a day, but I used to sit in that chair. I never felt that way, and in fact, I was trying to cross over and go and visit some of the other liaisons as well.
I think though, what would help that would be if I'm a liaison in something and you wanna go do something, just tell me.
Right.
And vice versa, if you're working on something and I wanna go work on something, and as your liaison, as a sign of respect, I tell you what I'm gonna do. And or
We should
what,
also know where each other stand on the issue, so you're not contradicting what Mr. Williams is doing. So there's communication and transparency,
Right.
always.
I'd like to commend you, Commissioner Albertson, for evaluating our policies and procedures. I think it's great to be a work in progress and always evaluating how we do things like liaisons. I think we need more communication on those things. So thank you.
thank you. Melanie? Not supposed to tell you that.
I don't have anything to thank you for.
Right.
I don't have anything to thank you for.
Okay. Gosh. All right. Is Jim Bailey available?
Yes.
See you
Good
guys.
seeing you guys. Steve, take care.
So we're not gonna work on this today? Are we just gonna go over it?
We don't have to, I don't wanna pressure the board, maybe you guys need some time to kind of think about things. Our regular session is tomorrow. This is not on the agenda for action or consideration today. Food for a work group, work discussion, we discuss. So if we want, what is the regular, do we have this on tomorrow's docket?
I don't think so.
No, it's not.
But we can table it for another meeting and you guys can
We
put some
could
thought into
talk
your,
about it and then visit each other about stuff.
figure out your passion and
Yeah, visit the department heads, think about what you'd like to do, but just know that from my point of view, you guys open door, talk to every single, we are an equal board on even ground. So, don't ever be hesitant to reach out to whoever it might be on this list, any single name. It's just, the list itself is deceptive. It leads you to believe that these are your responsibilities and these aren't. It's not true. Everything listed on this is each of our responsibility equally. My perspective. Anyway, is Jim?
I have to learn what some of these.
So it's,
I had all the acronyms.
hello, Mr. Bailey.
Good morning, Commissioners and Melanie, how are you?
Good, Jim.
good.
Are you going into executive?
Yes, we will be entering executive session